Greetings, citizens, and welcome to Maelodology 101. We are just waiting for class to show up because, unfortunately, I had some technical difficulties. And will not be able to personally attend in VR as I had planned due to a malfunctioning HMD. We are still hosting the class in VR chat, so if you wanted to attend, the instance is joinable. The link is up on Discord now. We'll just be waiting for a moment to give folks a chance to show up, both in stream and in VR chat. In the meantime, please enjoy the album Infinity Awaits Us by Aviators. Glad, hello!
Hi!
Good to see you.
I'm glad this worked.
Yeah, unfortunately my own HMD is malfunctioning, so I had to come in on desktop mode, but
Oh no!
luckily the class is more in my head than it is in my hands, so
That's fair.
please feel free to choose any seat you like. I'll probably be kicking things off here in a few minutes.
Okay. I... Well, back to my old habits of high school, which is sitting near the front of the class.
Heck yeah. Hey, I will be right back to get a drink, but we're still just waiting for people to show up, or not, you know. I don't know how many people are actually going to show up. I invited a lot of folks, but who knows?
Fair enough. I'm hoping more than just me shows up.
Hopefully. I'd like for this to be a whole group thing, if at all possible, but if it's just us, then it's just us.
It'll still be fun.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. Ah, good. Sill's in chat anyway. Hello, Reiner! Welcome! We'll be getting started very soon. Just getting a few more things together after dealing with the technical difficulties that unfortunately prevented me from actually hosting the class in VR like I wanted. The VR instance is still open and welcome for anyone to join who wants to. But yeah, unfortunately I had to go in pancake mode.
Pancakes is still tasty, at least.
There is that. All right. We'll turn the aviators down a little bit more. And we'll get things started. Greetings, class, and welcome to Maelodology 101. I will be your educator for this evening, Dalkin Starbine, aka the Wolf Bard. Sorry, I'm also reading chat here. Are you kidding, Reiner? We need the stereotypical kid in class who's just sleeping at his desk. That's like one of the staples. But nah, if you don't want to hop in VR, I totally understand.
Yeah, sadly, I can't fill the role of being both the kid sitting at the front of the class and also asleep.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, I guess you could be the kid sleeping at the front of the class, but, Reiner may sneak in some, you know, this is a college class, so it's fine. Anyway, I was gonna, like, you know, stand up at the front of the class here. I was gonna be like, alright, and I write out Maelodology 101. Let's see if I can still... Okay. Yeah, this is gonna be mega jank. Ah! Yeah. No, that's not gonna work.
That almost looks like a mountain. So
It does, a little bit. And we do have mountains in Melodium. Well, okay, so now we have cats in the class, so, that's the cat mascot, or the class mascot, the class cat mascot.
Her name is Lexi, and she picked a terrible time to want my attention.
Well, you know, that's just what cats do. So yeah, let me dig out my class notes here, because I was gonna have a whole setup. I was gonna have my notes in front of me and the chat and everything, and now I have to work with a completely different layout because the headset decided today was the one day it wanted to not work suddenly for no apparent reason. With, you know, none of the common fixes working. So, but that's okay. I still have my notes, so that's good at least. So, for this first class, we're going to be doing an introduction to the Fractal Multiverse. And along those lines, we're opening class with a simple yet not so simple question. Thank you, Eve. I do like this dress, this watermelon dress. I think it's fun. So yeah, a sort of simple but also very not simple question. Would anyone in chat or here with me, Glad, like to tell me what is a universe? Sounds
There's a lot of stuff that goes into that.
Yes, yes. Very good observation. Yeah. So,
and there's a definite threat of oversimplification.
Syl says a universe is complicated, for starters. I think that is also a good observation, yes.
It's full of wibbly wobbly, timey whiny rules and stuff.
It can be. We are going to get to that in a moment, but it doesn't have to be. Eve says one of her friends is named Universe, but no, that is not exactly what I mean. I did. It should be in the stream alerts. Yeah, it's in the stream alerts. On my public Discord server. All good, Syl. Thanks for looking out for me. So yeah. So we've got universe is complicated. We've got a universe has a lot of components to it. I believe was more or less what you said, Glad.
Well, now that I think about it, that's not necessarily true because I suppose depending on how you look at the answer, the universe could be anything from technically nothing to the concept of everything.
Okay, okay.
Because it.
So basically, it could be
like
many
answer,
things.
but I swear there's a reason. Yes.
Okay, that is a good answer. I like that. That's fair, Syl. Yeah. But yeah, that is where I put the instance link. I'm gonna have to change that hotkey, that key combo. I have my key combo for muting myself, so I don't make gross noises on stream. Unfortunately, it's Control Z, which Z is go prone in VR chat on desktop. Okay, that's all right. So back to the serious stuff here. Universe is complicated. Universe is made up, or can be many things. These are both good answers. They are both accurate. To the Melodian understanding, and but yeah, the point is, of course, that what is a universe is kind of a hard to answer question. But it is an important one to bear in mind when thinking about the fractal multiverse, because, you know, that's kind of your component part that we're looking at for a multiverse is multiple universes by definition, right? So Eve says her universe will soon encompass hot links and seasoned oven fries. Well, since I can't draw on the chalkboard, maybe I will put my stream up on the video player. Oh, except I'm using the do the background music right now, so we'll just keep the video player up though. We'll turn that up just a teeny tiny bit more. But yeah, so
I swear I'm not on my phone in class.
that's all right. You know, this is a like.
I'm using my phone for Twitch chat actually.
Ah,
so I can
very
keep
nice.
up on both sides.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm not really big on the no phones in class. Like, you know, you know, if you're here to be participating and learning, great. I want you to be part of the class. If not, well, I don't know why you're sitting in the class, but you know, if you're still learning something at least here and there, then great. But I'm gonna keep on talking about multiverses and shit. So, yes. In the Melodian frame, a universe can be thought of as, a system that is bound by its own rules. Like, it's a world set by the bounds of its own rules. So its own rules set its boundaries. And this does mean that universe can be somewhat yeah, the definition of what comprises that universe is a little bit fluid potentially. Because it is going to depend on the universe that you're looking at. Since its rules are what set its boundaries. And this is how we start to get into how universes chain into the multiverse. But before we get into that, we have to talk about Ideoforms. Now, I talked about Ideoforms a fair bit on our kind of like test run little Melodium rundown stream when I was just kind of rambling off the top of my head what I happened to know and remember about Melodian cosmology and that sort of thing. But Ideoforms are basically those rules. Ideoforms are what comprise a universe. They are what make a universe what it is. You might think of them as kind of the building blocks of reality. The thing is that Ideoforms are not elemental components. You can't break down an Ideoform, and like, it's not, it simultaneously is and is not its simplest form, because Ideoforms are concepts in context, so their very presence can imply the presence of other Ideoforms. And those Ideoforms can be components of each other. And this is what we call the fractal multiverse, is each Ideoform itself can imply other Ideoforms that are component parts, or can be implied as a component part of other Ideoforms, or both. And this can go down infinitely. And as you continue down along that spiral, you may find that you have encountered a pattern where it curves, it's recursive upon itself. An infinity of infinities. So, these ideoforms chain together in this way. And, as you put ideoforms together in specific ways, in specific patterns, in specific groups, however you want to think of it, this forms the rule set, the building blocks of a universe. Is this like how realms are described in the Myst series? Not, well, I mean, yes and no. It depends on who you ask within the context of the lore. I'm not really going to go too far on that today, but the Denis, you can't seem to get in. But so Glad, you used the link from the server, right?
Yeah, I did. It,
okay.
Was surprisingly straightforward.
Well, let me just send Reiner an invite. The stream's been paused.
Whatever shall we do?
All right. Where was I? Notes. I have notes. This is why I have notes. Oh yeah. So.
Ideoforms. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. It's all good. Thank you. But yeah. So ideoforms are, they chain together. And oh, here we are. Reiner, greetings and welcome.
Hey.
Feel free to find any seat you please. And, yes, so, oh, right, I was, going a little bit on the mystery. So, the Denis describe, the universe as, they use a tree metaphor. So they're like worlds that are branches out from this root tree that is the core of everything. Melodian cosmology doesn't really so we don't really know if there's like a root from which everything spawns. So as far as we can tell, it is just a fractal that continues infinitely. No matter how you follow it. And which would imply that there isn't really like a root or origin that we can really point to as like, this is where everything came from. But, frankly, we just, even with infinite time, it still takes all of that infinite time to explore infinity. We kind of functionally have infinite time due to how our native ideoforms are. But again, that's more details for kind of down the road. But suffice to say, we don't know everything about the multiverse. There are mysteries out there that we just simply haven't uncovered because we are still just people. We don't just know everything about everything. Maybe there is a universe out there where they do know everything about everything, but we haven't run into them yet.
Probably for the best. They sound very boring.
I suppose we'd have to find out. But, yeah, so, But that's basically what idioforms are. Is they are concepts in context. So, you know, time being, you know, since we're talking about idioforms, we're talking about time. The time idioform is a sufficiently familiar but also sufficiently complex idioform that it serves as a good example here. So when you think about time, just time, tell me what do you think about? Opening this one to the entire class. Just the first thing that pops into your head, or things. Eve says, mostly I think about the herb. Very nice. But also I think about how time is relative. Literally. Yes. Okay. Very good. Honestly, also a very good example. So the time idioform, depending on context, can imply time, the herb, because rhyming is a context. Nuance matters when it comes to idioforms. And that is an excellent example of how idioforms can go off in directions you never expected. But at the same time, they can also go off in directions you would absolutely expect from your own direct experience, from how time is relative within your own universe, how gravitational effects can slow or increase the passage of time depending on where you are in space. And so that would be an example of the idioform of time implying both an idioform of time, the herb, and also the idioform of temporal dilation. And temporal contraction. And these are how we form the chains along the fractal. And they will branch out in multiple directions like that all the time. That figure of speech is also a way that idioforms can branch off. That is the concept of time as a relative measure rather than as a physically relative thing. Context matters. Nuance matters. So with that in mind, it is very common among beings throughout the multiverse who are capable of perceiving their natural world and understanding their role within it. For lack of a better, you know, that are both sapient and sentient. Right? We can get into the subtleties of that later. But the point being is you can think and you can feel and you are conscious and aware of yourself and your world. And really, other beings that are less conscious are usually at least somewhat capable of these perceptions as well. But you're able to usually perceive, to a degree, this fractal nature of the universe, of the multiverse. Does anyone care to take a guess at what I might mean? Exactly. what experiences you may have had that could be perceptions along the fractal.
Well, the first one that comes to mind is the concept of linear time in regards to direct cause and effect when it comes to an action causing something to occur.
Okay, so that is
That's my first instinct.
that is perception within your native idioform. So your perceptions are obeying the rules of your native universe to perceive linear time as it is constructed within your native universe. That is a good one to keep in mind, but it is not an example of perception beyond your universe.
Fair.
Not strictly, anyway. You're getting close to the right track, I will say, but in and of itself, it is not. Any other guesses, wagers? Watching my streams? Okay, yes, that does technically count. However, that is technologically assisted and not natural perception.
Well, okay. In my personal experience, I have a unusual number of instances of deja vu, which at least involves perceiving time in a non-linear fashion, because it involves having experienced something beforehand, but I'm still not certain if that's what you're getting at.
Very good. That is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Deja vu is an example of perception along the fractal.
I have an interesting relationship with time.
Yes. So very, very good. So deja vu is one of them. I would be putting it up on the board right now if I had hands.
That would also imply retrocognition instead of precognition, experiencing the past.
To a degree, yes. But in particular, deja vu is not strictly as experiencing. So in particular, when I'm talking about deja vu, and retrocognition would also fall into this, though. It is you are censoring what Melodians refer to as temporal offset. Now, what temporal offset is because idioforms are infinite, universes are infinite. The variations on universes out there are infinite. So if you pick out any one individual universe, you look at that, and you're going to see there are infinite variations of those. And you pick out one of those variations, and you look at that, there's going to be infinite variations on that one, and so on and so forth. One of the ways that these variations occur is that when you are experiencing the multiverse as you exist within the multiverse as a conscious being, you will sense these nearby portions of the fractal, and some of them will be for if you were to lay those two universes side by side, if we're gonna like visualize this, you could say that their timelines are offset from one another, which is why we call it temporal offset. So that when you are experiencing now, the other version of you is experiencing, 3 years from now, say, for example. Or 3 years before now, in the case of retrocognition. And so on and so forth. And then this can stretch an arbitrary amount of time. The amount of time does not matter. But when you experience deja vu, you are recollecting perceptions across the resonance of the multiverse because you share your own idioform. There's an idioform that is the concept of you, that is part of the fabric of the multiverse. So every version of you is still you, infinitely. It's all still just you. And so even though it is, you know, another you, quote unquote, it is still just you. There's no distinction. There's no difference. All of the yous are you. And so your consciousness can pick up on the resonance from the other versions of you because you're all the same idioform. Let's see. Catching back up on chat. Still says, wow, nostalgia. I'm in class and my ADHD is acting up. Haven't had this particular combination of sensations in a while. Eve, as a strict physicalist, I'm not against the concept of alternate universes, but would require a testable hypothesis. Yes, well, Melodium, we were only able to test the concept of multiple universes, practically speaking, thanks to the way our universe happens to work or not work, depending on how you look at it. But we'll get into that later. Let's see. Yes, that's how time travel worked in the Michael Crichton novel Timeline. So, yes, that is arguably one of the ways that you can time travel. We'll actually be doing an entire lesson on temporal mechanics later. Because that is definitely enough to cover an entire class session, if not more than one. Because we'll have to get into how different universes handle time and that sort of thing, as well as universes that don't handle time. This is my shocked face, sarcasm. Yeah. But anyway, getting back to how you might observe alternate universes. There are other ways to just naturally observe the fractal nature of the universe. Did anyone else have any other guesses at what those might be? All right. So, we have a few other ways. So another one is what you might commonly refer to as the Mandela effect. Does anyone here know what the Mandela effect is?
Unfortunately, I'm only vaguely familiar with it.
All right. So, the Mandela effect, one of the more common examples of late in your native universe is I have seen used is yes, Syl just brought it up. The Berenstain Bears thing is an example of the
right.
Mandela effect. Basically, it is... it can be. Eva's asking, isn't that just a property of memory, misremembering of things, and then assigning significance to the dissonance? The way that memory interacts with multiverse perception is a bit fucky, because memory is unreliable. So there can be instances where you might assign deja vu or retrocognition or the Mandela effect to flaws in your perception, in your memory. And without the tools necessary to measure idioform resonance, it can be hard to tell the difference between the two. But we have determined that the perception of alternate events and that sort of thing is very common, can be perception of fractal resonance from near universes. Things where most of the Ideoforms are almost exactly the same, but there's just something that's off, and it can confuse your perceptions and and honestly the difference between the two is not always entirely clear, even in context, because the way the other idioforms of your universe work might screw around with that as well. Another time that you may have experienced the perception of the direct perception of the multiverse is liminal spaces.
Ooh, that's a fun one.
Yeah. So
never stand. Sorry.
it's all good. Anyone to tell me what they tend to feel when they're within a liminal space? What makes a liminal space feel liminal, aside from the obvious literal definition of it being space between? What makes it feel funky and weird? Sylvia says it's hard to describe, which is fair. Eve asks...
The way I seem to...
Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, Eve first.
Eve asks, aren't liminal spaces unsettling because they normally contain many people, but don't when they feel liminal? That can be the case. It isn't always. The crucial lack of people that you feel should be there, sometimes, that isn't always what makes a liminal space liminal. You can have liminal spaces out in the middle of the forest, where nobody ever is, ever. Just as easily as you can have in a subway station at night.
In my personal experience... God damn it, I keep talking at the same time as everyone else.
Go ahead, Glad, and then we'll get to Reiner.
I was gonna say, in my personal experience with liminal spaces, it's for me, it sort of combines a weird physical sense of things not quite being right with a mental sense of things around you seeming more malleable than they should. It's like it's sort of like you're expecting to take take a step down a flight of stairs, but instead your foot just hits the floor directly like in front of you. That's at the same level.
Okay.
If that
Okay.
makes sense. It's like you're not quite certain what you're expecting because something just feels incredibly off. It's like something's moving or flowing through that shouldn't be there, even if it's just for like a moment.
Eve asks, what makes my first example not just loneliness? What makes the subway at night example not just loneliness? You said you were describing a situation where you feel like there should be many people and there aren't as many people around. Some people might argue that is the definition of loneliness. We are talking about something that isn't just loneliness, but right. But my point is, Eve, you can still feel the liminal feeling in a forest. How do you tell the difference between loneliness in a subway station, loneliness in a forest, or liminalness in a subway station and liminalness in a forest? You're putting the onus on me. I'm putting the onus on you to describe the difference between that. Tell me what you mean by loneliness. And then maybe I can tell you how it's different. Yeah, I guess I'm getting a little bit into the Socratic method here. Why not?
Also, Reiner, I have to say how you're just full on sitting with legs on the table. Just no care. No care in the world. I'm not even sitting properly. I'm crouching.
This classroom is not
Right, Eve, but I never said that the definition of liminal means people should be there but aren't. In fact, that's why I was using the forest example to illustrate that it doesn't need for people should be there. That doesn't tell me how that feeling is, that how you are alleging that just being in the forest, how that kind of liminal should be closer to loneliness. Or should somehow just be loneliness. You're the one who's alleging that the definition of liminal has to include people should be there but aren't. A liminal space is called that because it's a space between. I already gave my definition of liminal. I said it is the feeling of the space between. I was asking, how do those places make other people feel? That's what I'm looking for. But that's what liminal means, is between. They don't have to be identical, Eve. That wasn't my point at all. But, you know, if you want to teach this class instead of me, by all means, come on up and, you know, you can tell me about how the fractal multiverse works. Yes. They both can be liminal. It's all about context, Steve.
And there's also, if I may interject, there's also nothing saying that every liminal space has to feel the same.
Right. Which was another part of my point.
Um,
There are
yes,
different
and
kinds of liminal spaces.
Yeah, and an interesting thing about my experience with liminal spaces also is that there are times where I'll feel alone in a liminal space. And other times I'll feel not alone in a liminal space when I should be
Right.
alone. That's the more disconcerting one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, Sylvia. Exactly. An empty subway station, she says, is more likely to feel like a liminal space than empty forest clearing, but they both can. But both won't always. And this is getting to another part about liminal spaces I was getting to, is that liminal spaces will often only feel like liminal spaces at certain times, if you are at least in a universe that experiences time. Yes, we've got music going on here on the player. It might be actually a little bit hard for you guys to hear it. Looking at the thing there, that should be a little bit better. But anyway, so liminal spaces. So, getting back onto that. So, what are you sensing when you are in a liminal space? Well, one might say, well, I guess, Reiner, you had some input you were going to give on that one. Do you remember what that was?
It was mostly just, kind of, I was curious, like, what exactly, like, because you said a space between, but, like, I don't know if I'm grasping that entirely, I guess.
Well, okay, so don't focus on that too much. But, like, you know what a liminal space is, you've been in one, right? You know, like, what that feels like.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, what kind of sensations does that offer to you? How does it make you feel?
Weirdly comfortable, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's an interesting one. We'll get back to that in a minute. Is there anything else? Is there like a consistency, or, you know, some, like, is there a reason why it makes you feel comfortable?
There's kind of like I don't know how exactly to describe it. There's like a weird acceptance to the weird, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But there have been several times before where I've noticed like an area like that, and it's just kind of like, it feels nice in a way that's unique, I suppose, to like that instance.
Knowing you, it honestly makes a lot of sense, and we'll get to that in just a bit. Sylvia says an unusual feeling of separation, which is also good. Can you elaborate on that at all, Syl, or is that about as far as you can describe that? Not really. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So, liminal spaces. Let's go back to the idea of liminal spaces as the space between. Liminal spaces are, when it's not just having the wiggities, oh, okay, we've got more feedback from Eve here. I usually feel an urge to depart, the pressures of my travel plans lurking in my mind, my destination. The liminal spaces, to me, always make me feel like an overwound spring. I have to relax and take a break in these places. But the thought of staying long is unbearable to me. Okay, interesting. Also makes sense a little bit, knowing you. So when... Sorry, Glad, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, sorry. I've just worked in hotels for like the past 5 years, so I have a very interesting take on liminal spaces. But
oh, please,
it's not
please,
entirely relevant.
Please go ahead.
Well, it's because a big part of the liminal space for me is the transitory aspect, the fact that what is there does not remain for long. It is a space that things are always constantly moving through, and so working in hotels as long as I have, it's been an interesting experience because the entire hotel, if it's been around long enough, is essentially a liminal space. People come, they stay for a time, and then they leave.
Right.
And hotels always, every hotel feels distinctly different for me in terms of liminal spacing. And it's just an interesting time because you never know what weird things people will bring with them that might stay behind or go with someone else.
I love that. Fantastic. Yes. Very good.
Again, interesting experiences in hotels.
Yeah. No, it's great. So liminal spaces. Kind of the space between where people are coming and going, things are coming and going. Feeling pulled in many directions, feeling like anxious, like there's something that needs to happen or that is going to happen. Liminal spaces are when you are sensing what we call fractal branching. Another way might be to put it as sensing possibility itself. It is oftentimes, especially where many things can happen, many different possibilities can occur. When a lot of different branches can appear on the fractal. That is that sensation that you are experiencing in the liminal space. And so some of us feel a bit more comfortable with the idea of experiencing the world in that way, and experiencing the world from many different perspectives and many different potential outcomes all at once. Some of us are a bit more comfortable with the more solid, the more from the perspective of your local universe, real. And so this can cause certain levels of comfort or discomfort, depending on the individual. Especially Reiner, an individual who might, say, be comfortable more with the idea of viewing the world from many perspectives at once. which is why I found that very particularly interesting.
Mhm.
So there's one kind of technically two different ways, but also kind of technically one way. We tend to lump these together of perceiving beyond local reality, beyond a singular universe. And it is something that is so unbelievably wondrous, and yet to many, often still considered quite mundane. But it is one of the most precious tools to a Melodian. That is dreaming and the imagination.
Sorry, I'm only laughing because that's what I didn't say earlier.
Well, I'm glad that you thought of it, Glad.
Again, personal experience.
Are they mozzarella sticks?
My
A delayed response from Eve, I suppose. Mozzarella sticks are good. But this is why dreams and the imagination are so important to Melodians, because all of these are means of sensing fractal resonance. And with dreams and the imagination in particular, this gets into an interesting question. We're going to get to that in a second. But because Melodians use crystallized ideoforms, again, we're just going to get into that. It is useful to be able to deliberately conceive and resonate the ideas of things that are more fantastical and farther away from our universe, our experience, our reality. So then the question becomes, when you are imagining, a fantastical world, anything at all, you are resonating those ideas, and you are pulling resonance from those ideas along the fractal of the multiverse. So, are you creating or observing?
Depending upon your perspective, it could be a mix of both or one at a time.
Very good answer, Glad. Sylvia says, I'm going to go with the Vorlon answer and say yes. I really like my students right now. I'm going to be honest. I'm very proud of you all.
If I may,
Please.
The reason I gave the answer that I did was because there are times where dreaming and imagining can feel like you're not necessarily making something, but you're discovering something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it can feel like this both at the same time. And I would say if it feels like you're creating something, then maybe that's more of the creation part. But the discovering part is what's always been interesting, and I would personally relate that to the observing part,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to making it out of nothing.
Eve says, if I'm creating in my dreams, last night I created Dr. House's beef rib stand, wherein he made me a delicious ketchup sauce and was very kind to me.
Aww.
Nice. So, any more comments, ideas, thoughts before I continue on that? Okay. So to be frank, we Melodians don't know the answer to that either. It could be either. It could be both. It could be something else entirely. Frankly, that is a mystery of the multiverse that we have yet to uncover, and we may never, ever figure out. But what we do know is that it is useful for establishing resonance with useful ideoforms. So it is one of the most important multiversal senses that we have. Whether or not, it's just all that stuff has always existed out there all the time and we're just observing it, witnessing it, or whether we're creating it when we think of it, or when we think of it, we are making it so that it always existed, or whatever else, whatever other possibilities you might be able to dream up. We don't know. But this is important because, when dealing with Ideoforms, we are dealing with, something also, kind of difficult to deal with, we refer to as Aether, which is also a concept I brought up, in the last kind of crash course little bit. Aether, if I were to try to define it simply, is, you can think of it as kind of raw possibility or undefined reality. Pure Aether. Or it is, supposed to be that, because the thing is, it's not really possible for us to directly interact with or observe raw Aether. Because that would imply Aether that is untainted by thoughts, is uncontaminated, is the second that it has experienced resonance with thoughts, it begins to take form, and it begins to take form into those thoughts. At the very least, the thoughts of it being physical and interactable makes it physical and interactable. We don't really know how to reconcile the concept of something that doesn't have a concept. If that makes any sense.
Well, it does, because how can you observe something you have no expectations for in a meaningful manner?
Yeah, well, more to the point, like, if it cannot be observed until it has experienced the resonance of ideoforms that make it observable, and then, seeing it puts, expectations on it. Yes, we can observe its effects, and we can observe, and this is why we suppose that raw Aether must be out there somewhere. So yeah, Eve was likening it to dark matter. Sylvia is saying it's like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. And this is definitely where those things somewhat intersect. So we can kind of suppose that raw Aether must probably be a thing that exists or existed, but it ceases to exist the second that we try to do anything with it. Because then it stops being raw Aether. So we know that Aether exists because it is what constitutes reality. It is what gives Ideoforms form, if you will. This is including, like, it is not necessarily material, so much as it is just what Ideoforms are collectively. And Aether is the more fluid form of it, the potential of Ideoforms to take form. An idea before it has become an idea, if you will. That is more or less how we think of raw Aether. So, just the very ideas of physical space and form, you know, producing part of reality, that is, those are Ideoforms. That is Aether that has crystallized and hardened into concepts that form the basis of reality. So with your typical universe, you get a bunch of these Ideoforms, you know, a bunch of this Aether crystallizing into Ideoforms that form things like laws of physics and, you know, depending on the universe. One of the examples I used last time was the universe where everything is made of cheese. So an Ideoform could just be the rule that, you know, like the idea that everything in this universe is made of cheese, and that's just an Ideoform. And it's just a fact of reality. So that can be as broad or as specific as is necessary to help describe that particular universe. Yes, the universe of mozzarella sticks, for example, Eve. Thank you.
And the slightly more worrying universe of the shark dimension, where everything's just sharks.
Yeah, you know, the shark dimension.
We're going to the shark dimension.
We're going to the shark dimension! Yeah, so... Sorry, 1 second. I'm reviewing my notes again.
But that means it's possible to go to Plaid.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we'll have to go ludicrous speed in order to get there. For those who may not know, that was a Spaceballs reference. I have to recognize now that movie is starting to get a little old.
Just a little bit. It's fine, don't worry about it.
Just a little.
So yes. So the only place that we know of that, the pliable Aether exists, and pliable Aether is changeable Aether. Aether that is truly inherently mutable by direct, resonance. Is in Melodium, and it is how we are able to utilize our crystal tech. Is we can crystallize our local Aether into discrete forms that are useful to us using cognitive manifestation, which I also talked about a bit in the last bit, and we'll get into that in a second. But in like your universe, for example, generally speaking, you're not going to be able to think about a that desk, for example, especially if it were a physical one solidly in front of you in your world, outside of the virtual one. And think about it turning into a banana. It's probably not going to just suddenly turn into a banana right in front of you.
Shame.
Now, in Melodium, the ability to do this is limited to certain individuals of particular capacity for thinking. That particularly set of abilities, we've yet to narrow down exactly how that works, but I happen to be one of them, which means I can manipulate Melodium's Aether basically at will. So if I can imagine an effect or something occurring, I liken it much to lucid dreaming. And a lot of other Melodian residents do affect the surrounding Aether subconsciously, particularly in their dreams. But I am one of the few who can just consciously do it intentionally and have the effects appear. Unfortunately, Eve, for the most part, once I've hopped over to another universe, I have to obey the rules of that universe. I can think up all the ways that I want to visit friends that are really far away, that doesn't cost any money, but I'm still as beholden to flying in an airplane as everybody else. There's some exceptions. This is how we get Melodian gates working from, we get fractal gates between Melodium and other universes. And if we've got the crystals and bring the crystals over there, the crystals will still work in other universes. That's the only exception. So crystal tech I can bring with me and use that, but it needs to be set up and configured and engineered, and it's complicated. And it can sometimes have weird effects with local reality depending on what you're doing. So, it needs to be tested and that sort of thing before it can be safely used. But gateway mechanics is also planned for a later session of the class. But that is something we will get into, is gateway technology and the mechanics of transuniversal travel. But that formability, that shapeability is what we refer to as Aether plasticity. Sorry, yes, glad.
Oh, no, my hand's not actually up.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm like adjusting myself.
No worries.
Sometimes my tracking goes a little wonky, so it puts my hand in front of my face.
All good. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't ignoring you.
No, it's okay. No worries.
Yeah, so, sorry, Eve. Unfortunately, I wish it was that easy, but it is not. But yes, this formability is we refer to as Aether plasticity. And, so it's very useful for me. I can just take advantage of Aether plasticity pretty much willy-nilly, all I want, as long as I'm here in Melodium. But as soon as I, hop over to another universe and then, say, faceplant in the middle of a crosswalk and, scrape myself up, I unfortunately have to wait until I can get home until I can magically heal my wounds. Just, as an offhand example, it didn't totally actually happen to me or anything. Cough, cough.
Ow.
But aside from my ability to take advantage of it, Aether plasticity is useful to the average Melodian for the act of Ideoform crystal manufacturing. This is where we get into Ideoform crystal manifestation. So like the actual process of how Ideoform crystals come to be. So our only model that we have for this is from Ideoform crystals forming from Melodian Aether. So while theoretically this applies on a larger scale to how other universes came to be, every other universe we've encountered it's all solidified Aether. It's all basically one nice, neat, organized, complicated, but wholly solidified chunk of Aether. So other universes don't really tend to have Aether plasticity. Now they may have rules and stuff that can appear to produce effects like Aether plasticity. So a world might have the idioform of magic and have magical abilities that are very wonderful and incredible and amazing, but it is just a part of how that universe works. It is part of the bounds and the rules of that universe. This is, as far as we've been able to tell so far, what makes Melodium unique among the multiverse, and why we are able to travel to other universes in the way that we are, and that sort of thing. Is because our Aether is bendable and moldable. Well, a lot of it, anyway. There are some things that are immutable, but only in certain ways. That is another thing we can cover another time, the particular weirdness of Melodium, but suffice to say, we usually refer to as Melodium melted. That's just kind of the metaphor that we find most convenient. It melted, and now we just take the melted bits and shape them into what we want. So that gets into the 3 types of Ideoform crystals. Let's see if I can really want to use this chalk. Okay. This would have been so much easier if VR had just worked. Okay. So, no, that's not gonna work. It's gonna be too hard. But basically, we have 3 basic types of Ideoform crystals. We've got, ones that are formed from what we call subconscious manifestation, which is, just stray thoughts, dreams, that sort of thing, or resonate ideas. And these ideas resonate the ideoforms. That then, if this resonance occurs, with the same Aether for long enough, over a long enough period of time, sorry, 4 types of Ideoform crystals. I was getting myself confused. Because there's 3 main types. There's, the first type I'm talking about here is cognitive manifestation. It has 2 types, it's conscious and subconscious. Sorry. So cognitive manifestation, yeah. So cognitive manifestation occurs from, when you are thinking about things, you are resonating ideoforms, just from the act of thought. The act of conceiving. And so, those thoughts will resonate out, and if the same resonance occurs to the same bit of Aether, or enough, I say like over a period of time. Time doesn't really, because time has to be present for it to matter, and it doesn't really matter for this process. But basically, the Aether can receive this resonance and then can crystallize. It will take the form of that, that idea, and become a crystallized ideoform. Now in Melodium, when ideoforms crystallize, one of the things they usually use, that they actually become physical, tangible crystals that we can pick up and grab. So usually when I'm talking about ideoform crystals, I'm actually talking about those physically grabbable crystals in Melodium. This is not always, in fact, not usually how ideoforms solidify. You don't have the ideoform of time as a thing that you can physically grab and pick up and carry around with you in most universes. Unless that universe specifically has other ideoforms that define that, which is kind of how that works here in Melodium. Is one of the few major ideoforms we have intact, specifically allows for the natural formation of ideoform crystals. But that ideoform itself is not an ideoform crystal, it's just a solidified ideoform, what we've referred to as an extant ideoform, which is specifically ideoforms that are the natural part of that universe. And in the case of Melodium, the ones we believe, at least, are left over from Melodium essentially melting. So we also have a time ideoform that is an extant ideoform, but that one's a little bit complicated, and a few others. So, with cognitive ideoform crystals, with cognitive manifestation, a recurring dream or whatever can accidentally form these, but you can also deliberately conceive of something, focus on it. Many people focusing on this same idea even, and crystallize Aether into a form that then we can use and incorporate into technology. And this is useful for us to bring with us to other universes to, say, make a return fractal gate back to Melodium. So there's also, and I talked about this as well on the previous stream, spontaneous manifestation. Because ideoforms also just resonate out into the multiverse. You can think of the fractal chain, the fractal multiverse, as a giant, infinitely complex string of crystals spiraling off into further infinitely complex patterns. And those all kind of sing. They all resonate out into the multiverse. And so Melodian Aether also just sometimes crystallizes into ideoforms just based on resonance from our conceptual neighbors, which would be like you guys, for example. Since before the melting, if you will, Melodium was very similar to your universe in many respects. In fact, almost indistinguishable. Yeah, that one got sold too. So the conceptual multiverse, or the conceptual neighborhood, which is those universes that share many ideoforms in common. So like before Melodium became Melodium, we shared a lot of ideoforms in common. But we don't know honestly what caused that event either. But the end result is that we're kind of funky, but it's how we're able to, so easily understand each other. Readily have context for things that are familiar to you is that the Melodian universe used to be almost indistinguishable from we refer to our conceptual neighborhood as the Earth-likes, which is the most of the defining features have to do with an Earth that is populated by humanity. Oh, hello, Mika. Welcome. So, an Earth that is populated by humanity or human-like species. And that is well, no, honestly, those are kind of the two big ones that kind of imply most of the other ones that they would share in common. You know, think of like your comic book multiverses and stuff. It's kind of built around that idea where, uh, yeah, that is how we tend to look at our conceptual neighborhood. Is it's a lot of those universes where there's going to be a civilization on Earth, and Earth exists where we would be familiar with it existing and in the way that we are familiar with it existing. Those are the Earth-likes. So Melodium still technically exists within that conceptual neighborhood, but we're a bit more disconnected due to all of the melty bits. Which is where a lot of our differences come from, aside from key differences that made Melodium its own universe. But yeah, we've covered that bit already. Well, honestly, actually, I can't get back into it a little bit because I did forget to cover a metaphor about that I meant to. My notes are totally like in order and definitely not like all over the place and disjointed and squirrel brained. Couldn't be
your
me.
Notes definitely aren't a representation of your universe.
Yeah.
It's just a room, everything stuck up on the walls with strings connecting different random bits. Fine, don't worry about it.
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
There's definitely nothing behind the curtain in the back of the room.
But yeah. But yeah, so basically that would be the conceptual neighborhood. We also sometimes call it the near veil, because that's usually when you're getting sensations from out in the multiverse. Naturally, they almost always come from the resonance in the near veil. So that is the veil that you are able to just naturally kind of see through and into. So when you're experiencing deja vu and you're experiencing the Mandela effect and that sort of thing, and it's coming from another universe, it's usually coming from one that's quite nearby and very, very similar to yours. Maybe even only just like a single link down the chain on the fractal. But that said, because the multiverse is still, infinite, and each of these has infinite variations, including your own universe and Melodium. That means that your conceptual neighborhood is still infinite in size. It's just that all of the ones in that infinity are going to be remarkably similar to you. It's a little bit like... Oh, the album ended. Let's just start that over. Fantastic. Okay. So the... you can think of it a little bit like in terms of sound, which is why we like to use the term resonance. This is why I wanted to make sure I got to this metaphor, because it's kind of an important one. So you can think of Ideoforms like sounds a little bit, where You can tweak the sound in so many different ways. You can change the volume. You can change the intensity separately of the volume. Increasing the intensity might imply increasing the volume, which is where we get into implied ideoforms and that sort of thing. You might change the pitch. You might change the timbre, the quality of the sound, and you can change the timbre in so many different ways. Even just talking about classical instruments, the timbre of a clarinet is very, very different from the timbre of a trumpet, but much less different when you're talking about the difference between the timbre of a clarinet and a bass clarinet, or a flute and a piccolo.
I was literally just thinking that same part.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Yes. And so all of these different things you can change just a teeny tiny bit, and that will take you to a different universe, potentially. And so in this way, all of these sounds together, some slightly different, some very, very different, they all resonate out into the multiverse, and they're all part of the same song. And each of these sounds has, infinite variations, infinite complexity, but that is cumulatively the multiverse. The uniqueness of each sound may be what defines a universe, but at the same time, you don't have any of these sounds isolated from one another, right? Like, they all exist together, linked. They are all sound. And so, is the multiverse even really a multiverse, or is it all just one really big universe? And this is kind of a point of debate among some of the Melodian scientists that I was talking to when I was throwing together this class, is we actually don't know. The conventionally accepted way of thinking about it is in terms of a fractal multiverse with discrete universes with, bound by their own rules. But the reality is we don't actually know that for sure. That's just the theory. So, along those same lines, a single idioform can be a tiny component of one universe, or it can encompass, the concept of that universe is itself an idioform that encompasses that entire universe. And you have idioforms. Yeah. We can conceive of the conceptual neighborhood. That is an idioform that encompasses the entire conceptual neighborhood. So all of these are components, but also the larger composite part. This is what makes it fractal, right? Excuse me? Are you good? Video played. Okay. It decided to start over for no apparent reason. Anyway. But yeah, so those being the component parts, but also the larger whole. And it can be entirely recursive upon itself. Conceptually. And that is what makes it a fractal. Because it's an infinitely repeating pattern. In upon itself, over and over and over again. Both greater and smaller. Let's see. Oh yeah, so, because of this fractal nature of the multiverse and everything being infinite, here's a fun question that I want to throw out at the entire class, both those of you on stream and here in VR chat. How do you suppose we target a specific universe for a fractal gate, say, or so that I can broadcast to you? Or be here in VR chat, in this instance, in your universe. Eve proposes dreaming. That's a thought. An interesting one.
I kind of had a similar thought of just thinking about it really hard.
Thinking about it really hard? Okay, okay.
The easiest way would technically be the most random, which would be a spontaneous manifestation of an idioform from that universe.
Okay, okay. So, glad, of course, paying attention when I was talking about this before. That is certainly a way that we can target a specific universe. Perhaps only the most reliable way is by taking a crystallized, spontaneously manifested idioform that, from the resonance off of that universe. Which is technically true, yes. However, what I was getting at with this question was more along the lines, if we target a specific universe, what about, the infinite variations of that specific universe? So, there's a few different ways to answer this. One of the ways you can think about it is that we don't. If we're targeting that universe, even with a spontaneously manifested idioform crystal. If I'm doing a broadcast, say, it is going to broadcast to all versions of that universe that share that idioform. Along that entire infinity. Because remember, every universe has infinite variations of itself. No matter how far down along the fractal you go, no matter how specific you get, there's still an infinite number of more variations on that set of criteria that you have set arbitrarily. Practically speaking, this is fine. It doesn't matter. Because when we need something, we're generally going to have a set of criteria that need fulfilling. As long as we fulfill that criteria, it doesn't matter how many more that we get. So, I am here, but I am also in all of the other infinite versions of here. Wow, this video player is having a time right now. Let's stop and restart that. Okay. Hopefully we'll be fine now. Anyway, so yes. Technically I am also here in VR chat in an infinite number of other universes functionally identical to this one right now, saying basically exactly the same thing. And so are infinite versions of all of you. But it doesn't matter, because that's just how it always is all the time. As long as we have fulfilled the criteria that we were looking for, functionally, it's good enough. So in that way, you could say that just thinking about it really hard could work. If you know all of the criteria that you need to fill, and you know the ideas connected to what you are attempting to achieve, you could conceivably produce the Ideoform crystals that you need through cognitive manifestation. Likewise, dreaming could potentially produce Ideoform crystals subconsciously, although those ones are less liable to occur because Ideoform crystallization generally requires a certain degree of reinforcement to be more reliable. It does just sometimes happen on the first go. We don't always understand the mechanics behind how all of that works. So, you know, it's somewhat art, somewhat science. But, yes, conceivably, dreams could be another way of reaching a specific universe. But at the same time, technically, we never reach a specific universe because that's how infinity works. But, you know, we'll still get, you know, useful ideoforms like the, for the infinite cheese machine, or, you know, an infinite mozzarella stick machine. Or, perhaps somewhat more usefully, we just have, machines that can generate stuff that we want, like food. You know, we have a machine that will just make food, any food that you want, out of nothing, at any time that you want. Because...
Fractal replicator.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, those solidified ideas, as 'twere. You've said, syntactically saturated by idioform. Yeah, I'm sorry, this particular, class is just very heavy on that. But the point is, we can make crystal tech, you know, a fractal replicator, if you want to call it that, that can make as much food as you desire, of any kind that you desire, because we've gotten the right concepts to allow us to do that without the limitations that would inhibit doing it in the ways that we want. This is why we look for importing ideas, concepts from other universes. Because if we can expand our horizons, expand the ways that we think about the universe and the multiverse, we can create more useful machines for us. And that also, you know, helps me with producing Aether effects on the fly as well, because if I can think of it, I can make it happen. As long as it's within Melodium. Let's see. Although that said, those limitations can also be useful as well, because incorporating limitations of specific kinds can be good for, like, say, making sure that an emergency shutoff functions correctly, for example. Making sure something does not, like, replicate infinitely unprompted. Since we don't have to deal with things like conservation of matter and energy here in Melodium. But yeah, and that's honestly about everything. Yeah, that's about all of my notes for the first lesson. Because that covers. So we covered. What is the universe? Universes are bound by their own rules. Fractal perception. Oh yeah, I should add, 'cause I forgot to mention, talking about seeing into the near veil and stuff. Dreams and imagination, the particular reason why they are so useful is they are the one kind that you are sensing beyond the near veil, into universes conceptually more different from your own. And perceiving, in this way is a practicable skill where, the more that you practice it, the further out beyond your conceptual neighborhood you can perceive. And, basically, the more you consider thoughts beyond what is familiar, the easier it becomes. Let's see. We covered Aether, we covered building blocks, Melodium's basic state, Aether plasticity, crystal formation, context nuance, sound, metaphor, conceptual neighborhood. Yeah. I think this is the point at which, honestly, I can open things up to broader questions for the time being. We've got a little bit of time before I'm probably going to end the class for today. But if there were any burning questions before I said, we're going to have to cover that later, or just things you want to ask about in the now, again, either on stream or here in VR chat, you are welcome to follow up now.
I don't really have any questions, because I would like to think I've been following along decently. Unfortunately. I wish I did have questions.
Let's see. Do I have to roll my own? Can I use somebody else's? Can I check out Videotapes from the local Blockbuster equivalent. Um... Could you please elaborate, Eve? Oh, okay.
Blockbuster still exists.
So Eve is asking about like complex things like the fractal replicators. So those do require folks who have some understanding of crystal technology and you know, the fractal tech and how to put those together to effectively make it into a machine that will function the way that you want. You can just take the crystals and use those for like to produce effects on your own, but they're going to require manual input from you, so you'll be able to do basic things having to do with the concept embodied within that crystal. And but if you want it to like do other like specific operations automatically without external input, then that's where the engineering comes in, where usually these machines will be comprised of a multitude of crystals all working in tandem with specific working towards a specific input. So with the proper understanding, you could quote unquote roll your own, but generally speaking, we produce these and we just hand them out. Once someone who knows how to make them can make them, they usually can just make them infinitely without real hindrance. It's just the matter of figuring out how to do it first. Once you know how to do it, it's usually not that big of a deal. So, yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. Cool. Any other questions about really anything to do with Melodium, with the Fractal multiverse, Ideoforms, Aether, Gateway Tech? I'll be covering Gateway Tech, Temporal Mechanics, Causal Mechanics, Aether Plasticity, and Melodian History in their own lessons later. But quick questions about any of that or other things I can gladly answer. Let's see. Sylvia says nothing comes to mind at the moment. All right, well, I guess that's it for today. No homework class because I think homework's dumb.
Yay! God, I hate homework.
So I'm really displeased that my headset decided not to work for this. So I do want to try another one where it's actually in VR. But yeah, fuck homework. That's gross. Mika hella'd on stream. That's right. Hella. Okay. So yeah, if we wanted to keep the stream going, I could go play something, but I didn't have anything planned beyond the class. The class did actually go for about 2 hours like I had planned it out, so that worked out pretty great, actually. I was very afraid I had, like, done way too much material or way too little material. But yeah, I don't know that we're going to be doing the next class next week, but I will definitely announce it when it is planned. So this might become a weekly thing. It might be like a monthly thing. It's going to depend on I need to gauge how long it's taking me to put together notes for each class before I can commit to doing it every single week. But I would like to at least do it once a month, bare minimum, and get people in and participating and engaging and learning more about the Fractal multiverse. So, thank you so very much for coming. It has been wonderful having all of you. For those on stream, we can probably poke at, let's see, who's on? It's gonna be, here we are. Nobody's on. Okay.
I love watching nobody.
Love watching nobody. Yeah. All right. Well, that's fine. We'll just go ahead and close it off here, I suppose, and that'll be fine. And we will come back next time. Hopefully, I'll actually be in VR and I'll be able to like do stuff on the chalkboard, and it'll be great. But I'll really want that for when we get into gate mechanics, because I want to talk about our trade neighbors when I talk about gate mechanics and actually get to a useful map of the Maelodian multiverse. Things, you know, pointing out who it is we normally, you know, engage with on a regular basis and in what ways and that sort of thing. But I don't know. That it's either going to be probably that or temporal mechanics for the next class. I'm gonna have to figure out from my notes what's going to be the best follow-up to this one. And yeah, sorry for the how goes trade with the mozzarella cheese stick universe. You know, we don't actually have a connection with the mozzarella cheese stick universe on that kind of level. I'll talk to my guys. We'll see what we can do. I'm sure it won't be too hard to make a connection with the mozzarella cheese stick universe. We'll see. Probably won't be listed on the major connections for the Maelodian gate network though. But in the meantime, yeah, maybe we'll cover Aether plasticity. I'm gonna have to give that one some thought, but I will let you all know when I have a plan for when the next stream will be. In the meantime, of course, we'll still be doing our 3 times a week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And as always, it has been wonderful having all of you. Farewell, citizens! But fear not, for I shall return.